Hi, everybody. This is the Football Hut, the amazing, spectacular, terrific, the great one, the people's champion. Your host, welcome back to the Football Hut. And hopefully, you like this video and hit that subscribe button. So, the Giants, as you know, are New York Giants at 2-6. After 8 weeks of this season, they had a great win a couple weeks ago, and then they had a terrible collapse against the Broncos last week in week 7, and they had a terrible loss in week 8. Now, over the last few weeks, the Giants have had massive injuries. They lost their best receiver, Malik Neighbors, who finally got his ACL fixed, I guess, today to record this video. And, of course, Cam Skattebo had emergency surgery on his ankle because he did a terrible job on it during the game against the Eagles. But if you're a fan, and we're all in this together, how do you handle a team that's not only bad, has a very rough schedule? They're going to be playing again another great team this week in the 49ers. And how do you get through this season? We have a young quarterback that has talent, has a lot high energy player. And people are talking about you got to, bring in, different receivers. And I got a list of receivers here that the Giants could trade for. But how do you navigate this as a fan? How do you get up for it? That's one of the things we learn as fans, from week to week or day to day in sports. How do you handle a loss? Now, it's a little bit different in football because it's how many weeks in the season, 17 games, 18, 19 weeks in the season. Playoffs, you go to playoffs. But when your team's really bad, and the Giants have been bad for a long time now, how do we handle it? It's tough. And then you see the injuries. The injuries always seems to happen to bad teams. Players that are really good, players that have a very good chance to do well, have terrible injuries. We saw what happened a few years ago with the New York Jets, and they had Aaron Rodgers. Everybody was so hyped to have Rodgers play for them. And then the first drive of that season, the Jets had, he ruptured his Achilles tendon, and he was out for the entirety of that season. And they just weren't the same. The coach was a lousy coach anyway, but they would have had a really great shot to win games, and it just didn't happen. And then, of course, last year they had the player, but it was almost like they lost their edge going into the season before that. And now you have, just to give you that kind of example. And then you have the Giants, who they've been so bad for so long. They've been drafting so high up. They drafted so many number 1 picks, top picks. They drafted Abdul Carter, who's done very little so far to make any kind of impact. There's all kinds of talk that they're going to trade, and there's talk that they might trade Kayvon Thibodeaux, who was a number 1 pick from the past. They've had such high picks and such talented players. And that's another thing you find out, is that players that play for a bad team go on to other teams and they play so well. We've seen that with Saquon Barkley, who was always hurt. That's an example of a bad team. He was always hurt with the Giants. Then he had a big year, that 1 year, the first year of Dable. And they picked between him and Daniel Jones to sign long-term. They signed Daniel Jones long-term. They let Barkley play another year with the club, and then he went and signed with the Eagles, and he had just a MVP type season. They won the MVP. He's riding on a plane with President Trump, and he's just a classy guy and a good kid. And to see how well he's done, and you're thinking to yourself, well, why couldn't this stuff have happened when he was with the Giants? But again, these are the kinds of things you deal with when you are a fan currently of a team that's been bad for a long time. This is a losing team. This is a team that has to relearn what they've learned in the past, and they've learned how to win from past experience. But this group has not done this at all, obviously. Now, we got another week. Going to have the trade deadline. I have a bunch of names here of players that could be moved. But the Giants, because they've been a bad team, but they worked very hard to draft up to get Jackson Dart. They don't have a lot of draft picks. They don't have a lot of draft picks to sort of move. So they might have to move talent off their roster to make these kind of moves, or draft, trade players in later drafts. And do you want to do that for last part of this season? I don't know. But the Giants really could use a wide receiver in particular to help out a very good quarterback, just to give him someone to throw to. So I'll give you a couple names from 3 teams, 4 players, 3 teams. With the Saints, we got wide receiver Chris Olave. He's 25 years old. He's the youngest guy in this group. I guess he's kind of wasting his time with the Saints. Then we have from the Titans, and he's 30 years old. This is Calvin Ridley. And of course, these are all teams that are struggling just like the Giants, but these are players that you can get something for if you're playing on those teams. And then the last 2 players are with the Raiders. 2 wide receivers. Tyler Lockett, who's 33, and Jacoby Myers is 28. All these 4 guys are wide receivers. Obviously, with Lockett, you wouldn't have to give up much due to the fact that of his age. Olave, you'd have to give up a little bit more because he's the youngest. He's 25. He's only been in the league 2-3 years. And the other guys, you'd have to sort of a mid-range kind of thing. But it's all about, at this point, with the Giants, is about the development of the quarterback. And you wonder, with the Giants, where do they line up in terms of with the ownership group? Now, ownership, if this team doesn't win another game this year, that's a possibility. With this schedule, it's a very difficult schedule. Maybe they win 2 more games. I said they were going to win 5 games this year. They won the 1 game, that was a surprise. Now it's the couple of weeks ago. But then they had that game in Denver, and they just gave up all those points. And how many wins are you talking here? Maybe 2 more wins? And we have a team that has a little bit of fight. Jackson Dart was fighting in that game against the Eagles on Sunday. He had fight in him, and which is a big reason why I guess some people want to see him play. But is it worth seeing him get hurt? Although the Giants' offensive line has not been bad. It's actually been pretty good this year. Going into that game, and of course coming out of the game. But like I said, when you have a bad team, one area of your team is going to drag the whole team down. Okay, that's what happens if you are average, mediocre, and you have one part of your team is really bad. They can drag your whole team down. Now with the Giants, they're mediocre across the board. And what I mean by that is they can collapse at any point. That's where you get that sort of horrible defensive work that they've had over the last 2 weeks. Like almost over 70 points in the last 2 games. 38 points this past week against the Eagles, and then another 38 points against the Broncos, and most of that in the fourth quarter. So in the last 5 quarters, the Giants have given up over 70 points. Unheard of. And the fact you have a coach there who has done a terrible job. You can't say that Sean Bowen has done a good job. And of course, that's another thing. That's an issue. It's another problem that a losing team has to deal with. It's a bad coach, bad work by coaches, bad schemes, bad ideas, and things that just don't work. No matter what the bad team does, it doesn't work out. Now, this is not a bad franchise, but they've gotten in this sort of rut of accepting losing and making bad decisions from the top down. I mean, John Mara and the rest of the ownership group is just Tisch Group is not great at this point. And based on the fact that the product has been so bad for so many years, you would hope that at some point they'll figure it out. because they had it figured out for many, many years. They had it figured out for 30 years. But the last 10 years, it's just not working. But I would also mention this, and I said this yesterday, the video yesterday, that NFL has rigged the schedule against the Giants. To have this kind of a difficult schedule, and they didn't have a good year last year, and to sort of double down on it, it's almost like they did it on purpose. I think a lot of people felt that when it came out. I know I was not happy with that schedule. And this is the kind of stuff you have to deal with. You know, it's like a pile on. It's like piling on to all this negativity. It's bad enough the team is bad. It's bad enough the team keeps drafting top of the draft. But also to get a bad schedule to pile on. You know, it just doesn't work out well. But you let me know what you think about this video. And, of course, please subscribe to the Football Hut, and I'll see you later.